This is the download recap from Sounds Profitable, the most important news from this week and why it matters to people in the business of podcasting. I'm Gavin Gaddis. The download is brought to you by Podscape. You can find out more at podscape.com. This week, the Podscape mid-year update. What is a podcast supposed to be? Once and for all, video will never kill the radio star, and here's why. Inside the Walled Garden, breaking new ground on YouTube podcast measurement, and Taylor Swift debuts new album artwork on Boyfriend's podcast. Let's get started. For several years now, Magellan AI and Sounds Profitable have collaborated to create a bird's eye view infographic of the podcast industry. That infographic, the Podscape, is a living document as new companies join the business of podcasting or evolve into new roles within the industry. Today marks the summer refresh of Podscape, available now for free download. If you work in the business of podcasting and would like to submit for the winter update later this year, or are an existing company that has grown and would like to be added to a new section of the graphic, or even have your logo updated, there is a form in today's newsletter that'll allow you to do so and get in line. This week's article from Tom Webster reflects on the 2024 edition of the podcast landscape. The 2024 edition, which surveyed nearly 5,000 people familiar with the term podcasting, found 64% of respondents expect a podcast to be audio only or an audio dominant medium. The expectations also aligned with actual usage, as when asked to assign a percentage of the podcast they consume as video, 47% of respondents picked 0 to 24%. While only 14% of respondents said video took up 75 to 100% of their podcast consumption. In the past few weeks, multiple journalists have approached Webster for comment on how podcasting has become a video medium, and each time he has pointed to the aforementioned graphs in question. Every time that detail has not been included in the end article. A quote from Webster, quote, "Still, perceptions are changing, and they have shifted in the past 12 months for sure. The expectation for podcasting to be audio and or video, in fact, showed a significant movement, but maybe not exactly in the way you think. I'll reveal the exact numbers next week at Podcast Movement, along with how they are related to actual consumption, but for now, I'll say this. The category that grew the most wasn't video only, or even video dominant. It was maybe either, which really will be the story of that graph." End quote. Tom suggests we reframe away from YouTube is the new default to this. Podcasting is the most flexible medium. Someone only making audio can open up both new audiences and new consumption opportunities for their existing audience by going to video. But the reverse is also true for video exclusive productions. By not having audio first consumption, producers are robbing themselves of new audiences and new consumption options for their existing audience. JAR Podcast Solutions co-founder and chief creative officer Jen Moss writes about the recent contraction of the audio side of podcasting, with several larger outfits downgrading their audio fiction and storytelling capabilities during economic uncertainty. Over many decades now, new mediums have sprung into the world alongside serialized audio storytelling, each time bringing new predictions of audio being donezo. And yet, podcasting is still here all these decades later in some form. A quote from Moss, quote, "These are what draw people to great audio, as they have for thousands of years, from hunting tales around the fire, to The Shadow on family radios in the 30s, to BBC and CBC dramas, books on tape on a Sony Walkman, early podcast hits like Serial, the booming industry of the 2020s, and today's branded podcasts. As for tomorrow, maybe audio brain chip dramas. That part's up to the geeks." End quote. Moss argues three core strengths to audio: portability, immersiveness, and intimacy. As Tom Webster has said many times throughout the years, time spent with an audio podcast while you do dishes or drive to work isn't spent time, as it would be watching TV or sitting in a theater. It's found time. Video podcasting has its place and it has its strengths, but with those strengths comes a slew of formats and structures that simply don't fit well. Interviews and chat shows do not scratch the same itch that audio-first storytelling podcasts have and will continue to fulfill. Oxford Road has a new report that represents one of the first scalable, performance data-driven attempts to quantify the impact of posting ads on YouTube. The report is built from 15 to 20 podcast episodes of varying scale, ranging from millions of views to just under 10,000, that ran embedded host-read ads for a client between September and December of 2024, running the ad both in audio-only podcasts and on YouTube versions. A quote from the release, quote, "The insights were collected using a first-of-a-kind process, allowing Oxford Road to sidestep the restrictions of YouTube's walled garden, which prevents third-party access to crucial ad performance data. Detailed in the white paper, this methodology was piloted using passive monitoring to track the performance of a real campaign in partnership with Crosswalk," end quote. The study finds a visitation lift rate of almost 8% during the exposure period versus baseline website traffic before the campaigns. Oxford Road positions this study as a step towards building more robust, standardized measurement of podcasts simulcast to YouTube. They call on advertisers and partners to join in on developing improved tools, data, and benchmarks for the growing YouTube podcasting space. After months of speculation and combing through hours of football conversations, the Swifties who've been diehard New Heights fans finally got what they were waiting for. On Tuesday the 12th at 12:12 a.m., social media accounts for the Kelce Brothers podcast New Heights posted clips revealing their next guest on the podcast would be Travis Kelce's girlfriend and pop superstar Taylor Swift. And a censored clip that was posted that day showed Swift revealing artwork for that 12th studio album. You get the 12th now? This kicked off a hype cycle in full swing, sparking coverage of the trailer clips and millions of views across multiple platforms. As I joked in the Download Daily, this is the first podcast news story in a while where my less online friends and family knew about it before I messaged them. And that hype shows the power of podcast marketing. Swift could have dropped the album's title and cover art on Good Morning America, or her Instagram, or even at one of her concerts, but the venue she chose to get the word out, and the bonus of it being the best way to mobilize her fan base, is a podcast. Wednesday the 13th brought even more hype, with outlets like the Wall Street Journal and Front Office Sports getting in on the action covering the release. That pre-episode virality moment stands as a testament to why it's beneficial to leverage clips for podcasts across multiple audiences. For instance, Mondometrics founder Nick Cicero took to LinkedIn on Thursday the 14th to document views across New Heights' Instagram, TikTok, X account, YouTube, and Threads. All told, both the 2 teaser clips and the full video itself, as of 8:35 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursday, showed the Swift episode had racked up 462 million views aggregate in less than 3 days. And as I write the copy for what I'm recording now, 8 hours later, the main episode alone on YouTube has ticked up another 3 million and isn't necessarily showing a plateau just yet. Sure, it's a particularly exaggerated example of this, given that it's the biggest pop star in the world using her fan base. But the fact is, shotgun blasting teaser clips across all major short-form video platforms primed New Heights to have a hotly anticipated episode of podcasting. Finally, it's time for that part of the episode where I give you my quick hits. These are articles that I've covered throughout the week that didn't necessarily make it into full story coverage today, but I still argue are worth including in your weekend reading. This week, on Wednesday, August 20th at 6:30 p.m., director Sean Michael Colon will be screening his documentary Age of Audio at the Sounds Profitable Lounge for podcast movement attendees. You can check that out with the link in the newsletter today. Fairing co-founder Matt Bayer has an upcoming webinar with Brian Barletta discussing what listeners remember versus what platforms report. scheduled for Wednesday, August 27th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. European podcast network, the Sports Social Podcast Network, has announced a partnership with Listener.com to bring all of their 600-plus shows onto Listener's platform. iHeartMedia's Q2 earnings call reveals podcasting remains a bright spot for the company, with $134 million in revenue. That's 28% growth year over year, and non-podcast digital revenue up to $190 million. That would be 5% year over year. Inc.com covers the rising trend of B2B startups using podcast ads as an affordable, hyper-targeted channel that gets their business in front of engaged audiences, largely made up of prospective clients. That was the download recap brought to you by Sounds Profitable and Podscribe. I know I went through today's stories fast, so be sure to check out the links to everything I talked about by clicking a link in your show notes, or you can go to soundsprofitable.com and hit the download drop down. It'll take you straight there. For Sounds Profitable, I'm Gavin Gaddis. Our producers are myself, Brian Barletta, and Tom Webster. And as always, I'd like to give special thanks to you for sticking with me as I brought you the top stories you might have missed this week in the business of podcasting. Robot?
Download complete.